Folks, welcome to the stream. I'm off schedule today because I have an appointment at the usual time, so this will be an hour earlier than usual and shorter. Uh, and for that reason, I'm going to do some, I guess I would call it cleaning up. In the course of what I did in a previous stream, which was to extract the notqmail project's wiki to its own website, which you can see here, and then set up a local instance for staging my own machine. In the course of doing that, I noticed a repo on my local machine that I had forgotten about, and I need to decide what to do about it. So that's what we're going to do now. For as long as we can. Yes, and if we finish with that, there's a second repo that I do remember that I have, which is a sort of a mirror of qmail.org, which is not the same as the author's webpage about qmail itself. That's this. This is Dan Bernstein's page about qmail that, as far as I know, hasn't changed in a very long time. And then there's this kind of community managed site, qmail.org, that also has not changed in a really long time. In the past couple of years, at some point, this site was down, and so it was convenient that there were mirrors of it. And when it came back online, I made sure that I had a mirror of it. And so that's what this is, although it looks slightly different because I jammed it kind of forcibly into an IkiWiki. So this site I know about, and I was hosting it at a subdomain of schmonz.com, my personal domain. But now that notqmail is hosted at its own notqmail.org domain, I probably want to have this mirror be, I don't know, something like qmail.notqmail.org. Like notqmail.org itself is going to be the notqmail website. But maybe qmail.notqmail.org can be a mirror of the old qmail.org page. Something like that. So if we get far enough, I might change that around. But first, what I want to do is look at this repo that I don't really know what I was doing because it was a long time ago, and try to figure it out. One thing I can see, if you look on the right here, this is a program called TIG, which is I love this for looking at excuse me, for looking at Git repos kind of interactively. Like if you like Mutt for email, you might like TIG for looking at repos. So I'm in a repo which, as you can see, I renamed this in a recent stream from whatever it was called. I think it was called notqmail.org from 4 years ago before we were hosting anything. And now it's called notqmail.org. What is this even? And here's something that I found in it. There's more stuff. When we go up the repo, we'll see more. But in here, this looks like me having converted Life with Qmail, as Dave Sill gave it to me, as an RCS repo with all the history, having converted it to a Git repo. And that is something I will want to keep, provided I did it correctly. So I don't want to keep the artifacts of the result because I don't remember how I did it, but I do, if I see anything that shows what I did, I do want to keep that so I can think about it freshly. Not in this session, but maybe in a future one. Right now, I'm just trying to delete things once I'm convinced I can delete them and get rid of this directory that I don't know what it's about. So this one I do know what it's about. This is a conversion of the Life with Qmail source document, which looks like this. And in a future stream, we're going to teach IkiWiki to convert this to HTML. so we can self-host that. And this gives a history, maybe in a more familiar way, like this. So I understand that one. It's in a temp subdirectory, and I had created an author's text for it. Uh, Somewhere Dave told me what email address he would prefer I use for the attribution, because this had never been a public repository. And so I said, I'm gonna convert it to Git. What email address should I attribute it to for you? Um, so that's probably right, but I would want to check. And then what happens in here? Oh, so maybe what I did is he had given me, yeah, this is probably right. I think what he gave me was the RCS history. RCS, is that even like RCS file revision history? Is that going to be a Wikipedia article? Yeah, okay. So I never used this. I mean, maybe I used it a tiny bit. I never used this on a regular basis to learn it really well, but I know it as a precursor to CVS, which I do still use often because some of the open source projects I work with do still use that. And RCS is very individual file oriented. It doesn't have any networking built into it. I'm sure you could use it over NFS at great peril, but it doesn't have any networking in it. So probably what I did is to figure out how to convert the RCS history into a CVS repository. First, so that I could try and convince myself that that looked probably like the real revision history using a tool I'm familiar with, but mainly because there is a migration path from CVS to Git. I don't think there is one from RCS to Git, but RCS to CVS is a pretty short walk. So probably what happened is he sent me an RCS history, I converted it to CVS, this is that, and then I converted that to Git, and that's that. So if that's true, uh, yeah, you know what? I guess for now I would just move this whole pile. Well, what's up a level? This is an, ooh. Okay, so this looks like the entire generated site. Yeah, so this has a lot of built files in it. This again is the source file. So I would imagine that if we do a diff against, that these are identical. Oh wow, they're not. Let's see which one is newer or older. Okay. Uh, at a guess, yeah, I'd had to guess. I'd say the one that's in this directory is newer because it uses a ping instead of a GIF. That's a later development. Because it mentions postfix, which is a later development than sendmail. Yeah, so probably this is essentially a new revision that just was never committed. So I'll want to take that into account too. But a lot of other things in this directory are simply built, and I'm not specifically interested in them. You can see lifewithqmail.org. There are many, many formats that you could get it, including plain text. Uh, oh, I see. This is a mirror somewhere else. Okay. Die Seite konnte leider nicht gefunden werden. The site, unfortunately, can't be found. Okay, so the mirrors are not self-hosted, is the point. Then I don't feel bad if those links are broken. I didn't make them. Not going to try to maintain that. But these alternative renderings, PDF, Perl pod, cool, PostScript. Not going to be able to care about that. I'm going to be writing it in English for now. Something potentially to our advantage is that now that it's going to be managed in an IkiWiki, we have, I haven't used this before, but I know it's there. How should I look? 18N? Not exactly. Is it localization? Yeah. So IkiWiki has a way to use notation to say what strings need to be translated using the PO plugin, using PO4A. I've definitely fixed that package a number of times in package source, but I haven't actually run a wiki where it's used. But maybe this would be a chance to do it. But it lets you annotate strings that will need translating and track how many of them and what's left and so on using an existing tool. So there's a lot of stuff here that is just, it looks like old versions, which given a repository we don't need, but I'm going to want to check those. So this looks like a lot of small pieces of work. Another thing is that the repository in Git so far only has this, presumably because that's the only thing that was in RCS. But I'm going to want to add other files now that we're in a repository that can track multiple. I'm going to want to add other files that get used in the generating of the document, which I think many of them are here. So for example, inst check is, I remember this being a script that back in the day, people did not recommend automating your qmail installation. They recommended doing it manually, reasons we can get into. But they did provide this script as part of Life with Qmail to validate what you think is your finished installation. So this is something that has to be in the website downloadable. Likewise, we saw that there was a logo that has to get baked in, so that has to be in the source directory in order to get copied by IkiWiki into the generated directory. So I'm looking ahead a little bit here to when we are going to integrate the SDF translation into HTML. But I'm also just thinking generically about the process of taking the source of some documentation and generating the result of the documentation. So it looks like a lot of stuff, and I don't really want to, I don't remember how I extracted this or where I extracted it from, and so I'm hesitant to treat it as any source of truth in this process. I'd rather treat it as a spike, I guess I would say, which is a term from extreme programming, as I understand it. The spike is when you don't know how things are going to go, when you don't know what you should want to do or how you should want to do it, then you can do an experiment that is time constrained in some way. You're not going to spend an unbounded amount of time on it. You're going to learn as much as you can in an amount of time, and then you keep the learning and you get rid of the materials. And then with the learning, you go again in an informed way. And that part is not a spike. That's just actually doing what you wanted to do. So I think, given how old this is and how much I remember about it, which is not enough, that this, if it wasn't a spike at the time, it's a spike now, because I don't know enough to productionalize what I'm seeing here. I want to make sure that when I'm reconstituting, or maybe just constituting for the first time, a history of the Life with Qmail source document, but also all the other artifacts that have to be there for the build. When I'm constituting that complete history as best I can in Git, I want to make sure I get it pretty correct because it's going to be hard to change once it's integrated into an IkiWiki site. So maybe this helps me think about what my first slice of the problem is, which is the Life with Qmail documentation itself has never been fully tracked in revision control the way that we would in this day and age. It's a very old document. I'm not judging the way it was done. I'm saying the way we would do it now would be that we'd put it in a Git repo on all the parts that need to be built with it. And we probably wouldn't put the artifacts in the same repo. So I think that's what my first step is here, is figure out where I got this tarball from that I extracted. Probably an email from Dave Sill. Figure out where I got the RCS history. I'm going to write some steps down. That's what I'm going to do. And generally, one, reconstitute a coherent history of WQ source materials. The source materials are lwq.sdf and the RCS history thereof. Logo small dot probably there from the beginning, question mark. But I want to, if I'm replaying the history, I'd want to add it with, if there's a revision where the reference to it was added, then that's when I'd want to add it. lwq.sdf. Oh yeah, the tarball with all the sources and generated files, seemingly most recent. Note that lwq.sdf in the tarball seems newer than anything in the RCS history. So I need to invent a commit. Explicitly not interested in other languages for now. We have a source file in French. So maybe include lwq.fr.sdf in the history, but then git rmit. That way it's easy to bring back. Lord knows that's cheap. Explicitly not interested in the generated documents, HTML, PDF, pod, PS, text, except insofar as we can cross-check our history is correct. Check and any other scripts referred to from lwq.stf. This list is in no particular order, very much so. Yeah. Okay, so those are the source materials. How to reconstitute. First, yeah, RCS to CVS, but this only covers lwq.stf itself. CVS to Git, then rewrite Git history. It's easier to rewrite the Git history than it would be to make CVS have a history. There are better, more familiar tools in Git for that. Adding the other source materials. Yeah. How to validate. Generate HTML and maybe text. Things that are easily diffed is what I'm thinking. From the reconstituted source repo, diff against the generated versions that were in the tarball. And that covers a few things. That kind of a manual test covers a few things. Is my, presumably we said this looks a little newer than the one in my Git repo. So presumably if I update my Git repo with this one and then generate HTML and text with a substantially similar version of the toolchain, the SDF toolchain, I will get a substantially similar generated file to this one and this one. And if there are differences, then it could be that there's material missing or added in the source document. It could be that the tools render a little bit differently, generate a little bit differently from the last time that he used them, the original author used them. But I should be able to either take action on the differences that I will notice or accept the differences that I will notice, at the end of which I will agree with myself that I have the right materials in place to generate the result. And then I think what I would do at that point is publish historical LWQ repo. And I would put it on there. Just add it to the notqmail organization. And then not edit that one. Not to be edited. Just for historical purposes. And then import historical, import merge LWQ repo into notqmail.org as a subdirectory, preserving. I've done this trick before. I can't remember how it works, but you can take a Git repo and import it into a subdirectory, a new subdirectory of another Git repo, and keep the whole history there. And I think that we'll want to do that. It'll essentially be our tutorial documentation. So maybe it would be notqmail.org/tutorial, something like that. preserving history, and then format STF as HTML, new wiki input format plugin, start maintaining our qmail-specific tutorial. Yay. Okay, so I think that's my learning for today. I don't want to blow any of this away yet because it reminds me what the ingredients are. But I want to go find where I got the ingredients, go through this process again. And that could be a nice stream to do when I have more time. So maybe for Monday. And then go through the process. It'd be kind of like a combination of Git things, or like prehistoric before Git things, and Perl things working with SDF, which you may recall from the last stream. I was able to get the command line tool to give me the help message without any warnings. So maybe there are still warnings when we actually process data. So we might have to, let me put that as a step so I'm not surprised. Fix SDF toolchain warnings, problems, bugs that come up. So that might be something that has to happen because it's old Perl code and it has not been maintained. I think the author died a while ago. So I may have to clean up some more as we go. But I think this is a plan. So I think that's going to be success for this session because I have to leave shortly for an appointment. So to recap, we were looking at what do I need to do to turn the historical life with qmail documents that its author sent to me into a coherent Git repository of the whole history, because that was never tracked all together. Turn it into a Git repo of the whole history, approximately, and publish that in Amber on the notqmail Git organization, and then start working with it in wiki and the input format plugin. So I feel very oriented. I feel like I figured out what I needed to figure out from looking at this stuff. And I will see you next stream. Thanks for watching.